Hey, hola, ahoy everyone. It's a hook pleasure to be able to greet you today in the .vvm virtual conference. My name is Daniel Gomez, and in this moment, we will have our traditional .vvm in action section, in this case, to learn about JS Directive in .vvm. It's really, really nice to meet you again in this event. I'm going to introduce myself. I'm Daniel from Latin America region. I work here as a developer advocate. An additional part, I have the opportunity to participate in Microsoft as MVP in the developer technologies field, also in C# Corner as an MVP as well, and as a community builder in Amazon Web Services. I'm software engineer, and always is a hook pleasure to be able to participate in event communities because we can exchange knowledge between each other and have a nice time and learn something new. So in this .vvm in action section, we will introduce the JS Directive to do some features. And in this path, we will have one demo to see how works JS Directive from .vvm, and then we will review an amazing demos to actually the first to learn or see how to recognize objects in images, and in the other one to have a translator of languages by text and voice, these both in .vvm web application, and finally we can see other resources as well. So we can get started. Okay, let's talking about JS Directive. JS Directive was introduced in this case in .vvm 3.0. JS Directive is a set of features which offers many ways to have a communications between .vvm and JavaScript, and also from JavaScript to .vvm. So we can see this amazing feature because we can call literally anything in JavaScript and use in .vvm. So how it works? We can consider some steps to follow to call JavaScript functions from .vvm. And as a first point, we need to have JavaScript models to have that operation or that functions that we can use from .vvm. Then in ASP.NET projects, we have to register that model in the .vvm startup configurations to refer to that JavaScript functionalities. Then in our views, in our .vvm views, we have to import that models declared in the .vvm startup to use the operations in the other path in the views and call JavaScript functions from .vvm. So now we can see our first demo to see how to use this amazing functionality JS Directive from .vvm. So in this example, we will see something very, very easy. The idea is have a little web applications to add two numbers with introduced by the users, and then can calculate that. The idea is from .vvm have a text box to enter these numbers, and the functionality to add that numbers call from JavaScript functionalities. So in this moment, I'm going to share a little project that I have here in my Visual Studio 2022 of .vvm. So the first point that we can consider is, okay, the JavaScript functionality. Here, let me show you in this path, in the www root, I have this file, javascript.js, and here I have a class. The most important part here is that operational functionality that will allow you to add two numbers as a parameters here and set that result. As an additional part, we can also send some values from JavaScript to .vvm as well. We will see this later. So the first point is this JavaScript file. Then we have to go to .vvm startup, particularly here in the configure resources, to refer to JS Directive. In the JS Directive, we can add a configuration here to register a new model. We can specify a name to that model. For example, we can use this name. And then we can, or we have to refer to the script model results. How? Specify the URL resource location. In this particular case, the location is in the www root for the static files, and the JavaScript file we can see here and specify or refers as you can see here. As an additional part, we can consider, for example, dependencies to send to our JavaScript files. For example, the format or structure is as we can see here, but in this case, it's a simple operations to add two numbers. So with this register of this model, we can use this functionality in some view. For example, we can see in the example in this default.html, we can use or refer to that model here with this refer with GS and with the name of the model. The model is as we can define here with this register. And that's it. Now we can use these JavaScript functionalities in this view. So in this view is associated with this default view model class. And here we have three attributes. Number one, number two, to add this number, and then have this result. So with these three parameters, we can establish our view. So the first point here is have two text box to write this number one and this number two. And the interesting part is here, have our button, our .vvm control, to refer to this click event and call an static command. This static command can refer to JS Directive here to invoke some functionality. In this case, our operation method that is established here in our JavaScript class. And then we can send the parameters number one and number two to have that process, to have the process to add these numbers. Then we can specify some references to receive some values from JavaScript as well. That is, have the communication between JavaScript to .vvm. In this case, for example, we can specify this command to refer to result operation, and the command is receive int value to this reference. What reference? In the JavaScript functionality here, naming commands, and we can refer to this result operation here, as we can see here, and send the result of the operation. And that's it, how it works JS Directive in .vvm to call some functions from .vvm and also send some values from JavaScript to .vvm. So let me execute this little example. Okay, our example is here. Add two numbers. Remember, these are two text boxes to enter these numbers. For example, 5 and 2. And calculate is to call to JavaScript functionality. Okay, and the result as we can see here. So this is our first example to understand how JS Directive works. Okay, that's it. Now we can see .vvm in actions demos to see how to use JS Directive in some scenarios that we can consider. The first one is have this .vvm action demo to have a recognition of objects in images. All of these in one .vvm web application. So In this case, the scenario is work with computer vision environment, that is to recognize objects in images. As we can see here is some interesting topic. And we will see how to use these environments in our web applications with .vvm. So the example that we can see today is have a web application with .vvm to recognize some objects. For example, in one image, recognize, for example, if there are bottles or faces or guitars, for example, and other elements that we can see in images. To do that, we have this solution implemented. As a first point, we have a custom vision resource in Microsoft Azure that helps you to recognize that objects, have a machine learning model to do that process. So in our part, we can consider a .NET solution as a first point, a class library to use or call that custom vision functionalities and then use in our web application. So in this case, we will focus in our web application because the idea is with JS Directive have a camera JavaScript to, for example, take picture or search some pictures and analyze that image to recognize some objects and show the results in our web application. So we can go to our solution to see this process. Okay, our example is here. And the idea of this demo is in this part, take a picture or search one image to then recognize the object in it. So I'm going to search one image here. Let me search one. Okay. I use here a upload file .vvm control here. And now I can use the JS directive to load this image here and then analyze it. So let me click here. And the idea is have the objects detected here. So, okay, in this case, we have the face, the guitar, and the hat. Let me show the results here. Okay, the idea is some comprehensible in this part. We have in this part the guitar, the hat, and also the face in this image. In this little example, you know. So the idea of this example is here. And now we can go into to see the implementation of this communication between .vvm and JavaScript. So let me show you. Okay, in this part, we, as a first point, we have the JS file, the JavaScript file. Let me show you here. In this case, I have this site JS file because the most important part here is this function. Take a snapshot, in this case, to take a picture in our web application. And also we can consider all this other functionality, update a snapshot, that is to update one file as an example here. And all of that, of all of these images as a take a snapshot or update a snapshot, we can save here in this path, camera photos in the www root for static files in this part, as you can see here. Probably as a future implementations, we can consider, for example, a storage accounts, for example, in Azure to save these images. But in this example, we can see the files in this folder. So the idea is that have this JavaScript file to take a snapshot or upload files, in this case, images. So with this in mind, now we can, or we have to go to the .vvm startup and here define in our resources here this part. Our module is called camera module, and the location, as we can see previously in the www root JS file or JS folder, sorry, and the site.js. this part. But in this case, we have one dependencies here to use externally JavaScript model, for example, in this case, to take a picture, in this case, one library. And we can refer here as an other resource, in this case, with webcams.js, in other location, in this case, in a local file, but also we can refer an external file in one, in some web page. So in this part, we have this model, camera model, and with this dependence to use other JavaScript library. So in the other path, we can go to the default page in the .html part. And here we use the JS directive, specify the name of the model. As you can see here, camera model. And then the idea is the same. We can go to this part and have these two buttons, as we can see previously in our execution. The first button to call to take a snapshot functionality. We can personalize this control, for example, putting this text, using some class. So this is one example. The other one is, for example, to have here, to refresh our web page to, for example, when we upload one image, we can call to JavaScript a function here and update the snapshot. That is to update our web page and show the recently update image, as we can see here. And that's it, the idea of that we can use JS Directive in this case to call with externally library here to take a picture, for example, and use in our web application. Okay, and that's it that we can consider. Let me show you the last example in this case, not searching what image, but in this case, taking a picture to recognize some objects. For example, I have here this bottle of wine, and let me take this picture here. Okay. We can see here, photo capture. And now, okay, we can use this refresh and then analyze this image. The object detected are this bottle and the face. And that's it, that a little example that we can see how to use this JS Directive to have this type of demos to take pictures, search images, and do something like this. Now I'm going to show you another .vvm in action demo. Let me share it here. This other one is about translation of languages by text and speak. The idea is very, very similar. We can consider some services, some external services to use in our web applications, and also use JS Directive to call some features in JavaScript. So in this case, the idea of this demo is, as a first point, by ourselves, speak to then have a text that is speak to text, and then translate this text to other language, and that text, that translated text, have the operation to text to speak. So this is the other demo, and the idea is very, very, very similar. In Azure, we can use some services, in this case, for the first one to translate text, and the other one to have speak services, to have the speak to text and text to speak. So this is from Azure, and now in our solution, in .NET solution, we can consider some library class to have that functionalities in Azure, and then in our web application, focus in called, in this case, audio JavaScript functionalities in JavaScript. The idea is, for example, record our voice and then send that audio to our web application to have that process in this demo. So let me show you this example, and then we can see the implementation. Okay, here we go with this, our DotVVM in action demo. So let me show you here. And the idea is that we can say something here for then transcript to text, translate that text, and have the voice of that translation. So I'm going to say something here. This is our DotVVM in action demo for this amazing event. This is our DotVVM in action demo for this amazing event. Okay, this functionality here to record our voices with calling JavaScript functionality, in this case, as you can see here from our .vvm web application. So I say that in English that we can translate it, for example, to Checo, for example. Let me translate it.
Toto je naše .dvm v akci demo pro tuto úžasnou událost.
Okay, I don't know if that's right, but our friends in Czech Republic can validate that. So this is the idea of this example. Also, we can see here this translated voice. We can use that with JS Directive as well. So now we can see how is the implementation to use this. Okay, we are here. And now we can consider as the same logic as we can see previously. In the www root, we have here in resources one file called script.js. And here we have that class, this class to refer this model to have this functionality here. And the most important thing here is two parts. Start recording to start the recording of the voice, and then stop recording to have this file, the file of the recording. We can also consider this static part visualize to call or refer from our web application this graphic of our voice. And the most important part here is these two methods, start recording and stop recording. So we can go now to the .vvm startup part. As you can imagine here, we have the configure resources here, and we have this register to set up our audio model, in this case, with the JavaScript functionality, in this case, in the path resources / script JS, as you can see here. And now we can consider in our views, in this case, in our example, default.html, in this part, we have as a first point this visualizer, but this is externally of our JavaScript functionalities. This is externally of the library that use that functionality. But the important part here is these two buttons to, as a first point, start recording with this invoke, and the other part, stop recording with this other invoke with JS Directive. So this is the idea of this example, and we can consider see another test of this application to see in this moment. So let me share you. Okay, our application is here, and now we can consider the last example. Let me say something in this time in Spanish. Este evento está siendo súper increíble, lo estoy disfrutando bastante. Este evento está siendo súper increíble, lo estoy disfrutando bastante. Okay, now we can consider the input language, in this case is Spanish, and now we can translate it to English here. And okay, I'm going to translate.
This event is making it super incredible. I'm enjoying it quite a bit.
Yeah, that's right. So in this case, thank you for that. And that's it in this .vvm in action section in the .vvm virtual conference. I hope you really liked this presentation. So in this case, to learn how to use JS Directive from .vvm to call some JavaScript functions, and also from JavaScript send some values to .vvm as well. So let me share again my screen here to say thank you very much. Gracias, merci de Cuyi. Namaste to everyone, because wow, it's really nice to participate in this type of spaces. And in .vvm virtual conference, there are many options that we can consider to create or modernize our web applications in an easy way. If you have any questions, comments, ideas, it will be a huge pleasure to be able to have in communication with you. You can find me in social networks as ES Daniel Gomez, or in my webpage as esdanielgomez.com. Or you can write me for anything in daniel@esdanielgomez.com. So that's it in this case. So thank you very much, everyone. Again, I really hope that you like this presentation in our traditional .vvm in action sections. So I hope you enjoy this amazing .vvm virtual conference, and see you in the next occasion.